No, right.
I'd like to welcome everybody. I'd like to call the
Not fair.
May 5th Budget Committee meeting to order. As some of you might know or suspect, Laura is sick today and not here, and I'm sitting in for her. So tonight we've got a public hearing that we're going to start with, and we're also going to spend some time in deliberation and review and discussion of the budget that was presented to us last week. I want to mention too, for everyone here, there's another meeting on May 12th, next Tuesday, and there's additional public comment that'll be received at that time. So this is our second of 3 meetings on the FY16 budget. So I think with that, what we'll do is convene the public hearing. A couple of things. We've got 12 people signed up to talk. The people who are wishing to speak have given us a request to speak form, and we've got those here in order received. So I'll call your name, and I'll also call the name of the next person in line, so you know you're next. We would like you to preface your statement with your name, your city of residence. If you're a Eugene resident, if you know your ward, please provide that to us. You've got 3 minutes, and we've got a clock up here, and there are lights on the timer, and there'll be a blinking yellow light that'll let you know you've got about 30 seconds remaining. And there will be a sound that indicates the end of your 3 minutes. So with that, I think we'll get started. The first person signed up is Josh Newman, followed by Misha English. That's the place right there. Yeah, that's the spot. Thanks.
Oh, I can sit. Great.
You can sit.
Well, thank you. My name's Josh Newman, and I live in Eugene in Ward 1. And I'm a friendly neighbor area board member. And first, just thank you all for your service and dedication of time. I realize the budget is complex and takes time, and you have some difficult decisions to make. I'm here to support the restoration of Neighborhood Association newsletter and matching grant funding. This is a relatively small amount of funding, $55,000 roughly in combined, and but this is an investment that pays substantial dividends in terms of volunteerism, promotion of city programs and projects, and needed outreach to community members. As you're, I'm sure, aware, a quarterly hard copy newsletter is a neighborhood association's most effective tool in reaching out to the community. This is how most people find out about how to participate in their neighborhoods, how to volunteer on neighborhood projects, like a park cleanup, for example, where they can find information about neighborhood watch and CERT training, where they hear from city staff about crime prevention or city traffic, a city traffic calming project, where they can come to a general meeting and meet their neighbors or hear about how they can help preserve a historic stadium. Neighborhood general meetings are where neighbors can get to know each other. It's one way that the social capital of the neighborhood comes to be. Neighborhood associations help create community spirit and a sense of place that makes neighborhoods attractive, that increase real estate value and tax revenues, and which in turn replenishes the general fund. This outreach also leads to thousands of hours of volunteerism, some of which helps offset city costs in other areas. Matching grants are often more than matched by the amount of neighbor volunteer hours and other forms of neighbor contribution. I hope you will give serious consideration to the restoration of these funds. It's a small investment that will make a huge difference in our community. Thank you.
Thanks. Before we go on, I want to mention real quickly, there are some people here tonight to give some comment about the proposed aid to Nepal for the disaster relief. I want to mention, if you weren't here, the council met at 5 and approved a motion to send $50,000 to Kathmandu for earthquake relief. So I would just give you that for information. So I've got Misha English, and followed by Dennis Ramsey.
Thank you. My name is Misha English. I'm a resident of the city of Eugene, Lane County. I'm a former attorney, small business owner, and a current longtime volunteer at the First Avenue Shelter. When I last made public comment to this committee, I requested allocation of funding for a new animal shelter. I also submitted a 3-page letter of testimony supporting a new shelter signed by myself and 10 fellow longtime dog kennel volunteers with over 22,000 hours of collective service to the shelter. I've talked to a lot of people since then. Our grassroots new shelter campaign has written and met with several city councilors and county commissioners, as well as attended many budget meetings and Lane County Animal Services Advisory Committee meetings. We've also reached out to the community to get a sense of what kind of support the new shelter would have. In all realms, we are hearing, yes, we need and want a new shelter. So it's not a question of whether, but how. Since testifying last time, I was also contacted by Carrie Lieberman of the Green Hill Humane Society, who offered to meet with our group regarding the new campaign for the public shelter. On March 5th, myself and 7 other volunteers met with Mr. Lieberman and were informed that he had just met with the 3 animal services managers of Eugene, Lane County, and Springfield, and that they were working to fund a $10 to $12 million shelter to be built on Green Hill property that would house Green Hill's nonprofit shelter operation alongside the public shelter. When I asked how public monies could be used to build a public shelter on private land, we were told that it would not be a public building, it would be private. Further, we were told that the plan would be to agree on a much higher animal services contract price to span a much longer period of time than the current 3-year with 3 one-year options in order to commit the public to paying for its share of the capital improvements by proxy. As someone who spends most of her free time working with our community's shelter dogs and fostering them, I'm in favor of a new public shelter ASAP. But as a taxpayer, I strongly object to this plan to build a new private shelter with taxpayer money. It would not be good value as we'd pay for capital improvements but have no capital to show for it. It would marry Green Hill and our animal services well into the foreseeable future. It would put us in a weak bargaining position once Green Hill had the only facilities in town. And finally, public extrication from the contract would be virtually impossible. This community wants a new centrally located, publicly owned shelter facility, and I believe it's willing to pay for it. I respectfully request that this committee begin planning to fund a new public shelter. We need to build a new public shelter on public lands so that oversight stays in public hands. Thank you.
Thanks. We've got Dennis Ramsey, followed by Cheryl Byer.
Good afternoon. My name is Dennis Ramsey. I am in Claire Syrette's ward, and I'm the treasurer of the Whitaker Community Council. I've also been the president of the Eugene Kathmandu Sister City Association for 10 years. We have a lot of contacts and connections in Kathmandu. We have a lot of eyes on the ground. We have all of the latest updates of the situation in Kathmandu, in the earthquake situation. I wanted to speak to Councillor Pryor's initiative motion to spend part of the funding on reconstructing monuments and such. The Japanese government and UNESCO have already agreed to fund all of that. So we're aware of that because we have deep connections in Kathmandu. And I understand that while the council itself is not in charge of the allocation of the funding, it would be the mayor and the city manager to decide on the allocation. I would like to speak to, first of all, to speak to some recent news stories that came out about our organization's nonprofit status. That was an inadvertent mistake. Those problems have been corrected. Our organization has been fully compliant with DOJ regulations since last Tuesday. So all of our fundraising is not only legal and above board, but our nonprofit status is being reinstated this week. Our nonprofit status is being reinstated this week, and because our application with the IRS was inadvertently closed rather than processed, all fundraising is retroactively allowed and perfectly above board. So all of those questions are moot. I'd like to tell you a little bit about where we have allocated our funding. And because of our situation of knowing so many people in Kathmandu and knowing the real situation on a daily basis, we're able to allocate funding almost in a surgical fashion. And so what we've decided to do is we've raised $17,000 this week, by the way. So 1/3 of our funding is going to the Gorka Foundation. The Gorka Foundation has been 20 or 30 years as a foundation in the Gorka area, which is at the epicenter of the earthquake zone. Mercy Corps simply subcontracts with the Gorka Foundation to provide relief assistance in that area. And so our strategy is why send the money through Mercy Corps on the way to the Gorka Foundation anyway? Why not direct it directly to the Gorka Foundation? So 1/3 of our funding is going there. The other 1/3 of our funding is going to the American Nepal Medical Foundation, which is a group of mostly American-trained Nepalese doctors, both in the United States and in Nepal, and they're providing wound care, trauma care, and communicable disease relief on the ground in real time. The other 1/3 of our allocation is going towards providing clean water for people who are now living on the street under tarps. They don't have clean water. We already have reports that cholera and typhoid have begun because there are so many bodies under the rubble. Some parts of the town are stenching pretty badly, and the runoff, as well as the fact that all the water mains have mixed.
I'm going to need you to kind of wrap up your remarks.
Oh, all right. So we've provided 1/3 of our funding for clean water. So please consider us as a conduit for these funds because we can allocate them surgically. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Cheryl Byer, followed by Andrew Fisher.
Thank you. My name is Cheryl Byer, and I've been a small business owner in Eugene for many years. I've been a resident of Eugene for over 30 years, and during that time I've supported various animal rescue groups as well as countless individuals who tirelessly spay, neuter strays, do foster care, catch and release. It's just endless the amount of people in this town that go unnoticed doing these things and have been doing it for decades. The reason there are so many residents taking on rescues and medical bills and constantly having to find homes for companion animals in Lane County is because we do not have a proper public shelter. Eugene desperately needs a public shelter, publicly owned, on a centrally located piece of land. And most importantly, this public shelter cannot be in bed with Green Hill, a very private shelter. We just can't have a private shelter receiving public funds because the private aspect will be a nightmare, and there will be a lot of politics, I'm sure. If we need a bond measure to build and sustain a public and easily accessible shelter, let's begin the process. It's long overdue. I've spoken with dozens of property owners who actually believe we are obligated to provide animals in Lane County with a proper, up-to-date facility. They all want it to be a public shelter that easily serves Eugene and Springfield in a centrally located place. And many of those residents own multiple properties and tax lots, and yet would still be happy to see a $10, $20 a year increase in their taxes, whatever it takes to provide a shelter they could be proud of. I've been waiting 3 decades to see Eugene become a place that takes care of its homeless animals and also provides an ongoing education coordinator in the community so that we don't have these problems. We need a next generation to be compassionate and understand the importance of spaying and neutering. It's our only hope to reduce Lane County's outrageous problem with pet overpopulation. The animals deserve better, and so do Lane County residents. Thank you.
Thanks. Andrew Fisher, followed by Juan Carlos Valle.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Fisher. I'm the volunteer chairperson for Friendly Area Neighbors. I reside in Ward 1. I'm here tonight to ask for your support to ensure that neighborhood associations like Friendly Area Neighbors are funded so that we can mail and print quarterly newsletters to all our residents. As you know, city funds were reduced to neighborhood associations publications, but over the last year we've found that the cost to print and mail these has actually gone up. And due to the reduction of this funding, there's some concern that neighborhood associations like ours might not be able to provide residents with the information on all the important projects and events that are going on. And there's a lot going on, as you know, in and around South Willamette, the special area zone, the street improvement plan. I know it's a lot for you to consider, but I know it must be even more for neighbors too, and so that's why the Fan Board feels it's so important that we have this funding so that regular citizens can be involved. And it's in light of this vision growth and development that we hope that we can continue to meet the neighbors' need and maybe their expectation that we have this regular information for them. And so sustaining quarterly neighborhood publications, I believe it's an investment in our citizenry. And it affirms our commitment to fostering vital public involvement in civic affairs. So please, I hope you can find a way to continue to fund neighborhood outreach. Thanks.
Thank you. Juan Carlos Valle, followed by Peter Knox.
Good evening. My name is Juan Carlos Valle. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight, and thank you for the work you do. I know you have to make a lot of choices that are hard. Hopefully it's not going to be as hard this time. So I'm also here as the chair of the Quest Drive Citizen Association, soon to be the Southwest Hills Neighborhood Association. Our neighborhood associations reach tens of thousands of citizens to provide information about city government, land use plans, initiatives, and resources provided by the local government, just to name a few. We serve as conduit to city staff and city services, initiatives, and we provide direct feedback to our local government. This valuable gateway to the citizenship and residents of distinct areas of the city is an invaluable asset to elected and non-elected officials. To continue our collective missions, I ask for your consideration of restoration of the 20,000 matching grants programs and the 35,000 communication budget. This reinvestment will help us engage and facilitate citizen and resident involvement in both the neighborhoods and with matters of government. Some of you might agree with me that our newsletters is one of the most valuable tools we have, and it is meaningful in participation and inclusion. Our neighbors still do not have computers or access to the internet. Needless to say, a communication system with our neighbors is vital to their participation and to get their news. I ask for your consideration and investment to all the neighborhood associations. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Knox, followed by Harvey Bluestein.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Knox. I am the co-chair of Neighborhood Leaders Council. I've also been chair of West University, and currently I am on the steering committee of Downtown Neighbors Association. So you can guess why I'm here. I'm helping to ask for the neighborhoods to have the restoration of funding for the outreach budget, as well as matching grants. Now, I have a letter that I'm going to pass out to all of you that is from Neighborhood Leaders Council, but before I do that, I want to take a minute to kind of personalize the story. 5 years ago, I didn't know neighborhoods existed. I mean, I knew neighborhoods existed, but I didn't know there was a leadership structure. There was a way to get involved. I got a postcard a postcard from the neighborhood association. And I saw there was a meeting, saw there was something on the agenda I was interested in, and here we are 5 years later. But I'm not the only one who has a story like this. If people, oftentimes they look at the newsletter that comes from their neighborhood association, they go, well, I didn't know they were dealing with this issue. This is something I'm really, really interested in. So they came to the meeting and found out that they were not alone in trying to deal with something, and they found a mechanism to work with it. I talked to many people throughout the community who aren't necessarily community leaders who want to have a part in it, and this is the way they get to do it. Without the funding for the newsletters and postcards and things that reach out to people, the neighborhood associations can't reach the people who really want to do something, the citizens of Eugene. As far as the matching grant program, I haven't had personal touch with it. I can tell you that neighborhoods that have, like friendly area neighbors and others, they put those things to good use. They've had volunteer hours that have given countless amount of dollars back to the city, not necessarily in revenue, but in work and in community improvements. So without further ado, I will pass these out. I'm not sure if I have the right counting. Oh, I got it. There. A couple short here. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Got Harvey Bluestein, followed by Sudarshan Karki.
Good evening. My name is Harvey Bluestein. I'm a resident of Eugene. I just moved here, so I didn't even know Eugene has wards. You learn something every day. But what I do know is Nepal. I was an anthropologist there in the 1970s. I have a house my wife and I have a house in Gorkha district, about 15 miles from where the epicenter was. And like everybody who is interested in Nepal, I've been on email and the phone all week just finding out what's going on there. And one thing that has become very clear is that the big aid organizations are in many respects falling down on the job. They're very good at what they do in routine times, but these are not routine times. What Nepalis need are tarps and tents and blankets and water purification systems, and these agencies just don't have the wherewithal and the networks to deliver those. Organizations like the Gorkha Foundation, and I have to full disclosure, I'm on the board of the Gorkha Foundation, do. We've managed to get supplies from India. We've managed to get helicopters to ferry those supplies up to areas. And what my basic message is that as you decide how to allocate the funds, they really need to go to people who understand Nepal and who know how to get things done. Because keep in mind, when the catastrophic earthquake occurs here, and it will, you will want aid decisions and distribution to be done by people who know Eugene, not people who are flooding into this area. Similarly, in Nepal, the decisions should be made and the aid should be distributed by people, Nepalis, who know the system and who know how to get things done. So please consider giving to the Eugene Kathmandu Sister City Association, because we have the contacts, we have the interest, we have the networks, and we know how to distribute the aid so it actually helps the Nepalis in their time of need. Thank you.
Thank you. Sudarshan Karki, followed by Dr. Binaya Rimal.
I'm Sudarshan Karki, a grad student from Nepal at UFO. I would like to thank the City Council on allocating these funds for the aid for Nepal right now. We are needing any help we can get right now, and this is a big gesture of friendship, and we really appreciate it. And going further from here, if Kathmandu Eugene Sister City requires any kind of help from us in terms of information in terms of people we have on the ground, friends we have on the ground who can give us information, and we can relay back to them. And I hope they can work very closely with the people who are working directly into the ground on this relief effort. Thank you. And I want to thank everybody again from the whole Nepalese community and students at University of Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Binaya Rimal, followed by John Borofsky.
Hey, good evening. I'm Dr. Binay Rimal. I'm a local physician. I specialize in taking care of critically ill patient, critically injured patient. I work at McKenzie and Ribbon Hospital.
Excuse me, could you move just a little closer?
And I am very closely affiliated with Eugene Kathmandu Sister City Organization. We weren't sure if the fund was going to be allocated to Kathmandu, so my being here was kind of to put some support on it, but thanks a lot. Thank you for this generous offer. In fact, I will be traveling to Kathmandu on Thursday with a small relief team of physicians to provide direct care, first aid, and basically taking care of trauma patients, and will be at the ground zero in Sindhupalchok and Gorkha. Any aid to the Sister City Foundation, will, like how they've said, go through us directly where there is a need, rather than a big organization. There's been a gridlock in the airport. The bureaucracy is not letting stuff that has already been there in the airport, in the border, to be distributed. So going locally through small channels is probably the more effective way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. John Borofsky, followed by John Belcher.
Good evening. John Borofsky, Eugene Ward 3. Good evening. Thanks for your work on the Budget Committee. I'm here to speak about the Neighborhood Association issue as well. As I look around here, I would imagine that the majority of the people that are sitting at this table got their first taste of city politics and things through the neighborhood associations. I know I did. I showed up at one and raised my hand, and many committee meetings later, I'm still here. A couple of things I'd like to say is the importance of the newsletters, I think, that go out. There are, in our neighborhood, it's a really important part. We try and do things electronically, but we have 1,600 addresses in our neighborhood, and we've got about 120 emails. So there is a disconnect. We keep trying. So it's a very important thing. As far as the matching grants, going back up to the $50,000 range, when the city manager made his presentation last week, he had a phrase that he said that the city has used some one-time money to do things that further the city as a whole down the line. I think that matching grants do that. I think that it's an appropriate use of one-time money, because if you build a kiosk in a park and get matching funds, that's something that improves the city on down the line, and other things like that. As far as the outreach money, I just want you guys to have a discussion about it, see what is the appropriate use for that. I know there's concern that some neighborhoods use it more than others. In response to that, the underutilized neighborhoods, I believe that if they don't have the ability to outreach with newsletters and postcards, will never achieve that level of attendance and things that we want from them. As far as if it's not being used for newsletters, perhaps let the neighborhood associations decide how they want to use it. Maybe they would rather have some other form of outreach. But have that discussion. And then there's also talk that it's not all being used right now. Well, if that's the case, what will happen is it should come back in the marginal beginning working capital and get allocated the next year. So please have a conversation about this. And maybe next week I'll come with a funding option for you guys.
Thank you. John Belcher. Thank you. Thank you.
Members of the Eugene Budget Committee, I'm John Belcher, co-chair of the River Road Community Organization, and if I resided in the city, I would live in Ward 7. But many of my neighbors do live within the city. I want to thank you for your service to the city, and I'm sure it's no surprise that I'm here to support the Neighborhood Leaders Council's requests for the restoration of the $55,000. I'm going to not try to cover what others have. The money is allocated for newsletters and other outreach to each neighborhood association based on the number of their mailing addresses. So it starts out equitable, that's for sure. And neighborhood associations are exploring other ways to communicate with their constituents. Many of us have Facebook pages, and more of us send out periodic email updates, both of which are effective in timeliness and cost. But we don't reach everyone. For example, River Road Facebook page has 165 likes, and our e-news list has 461 email addresses, which may sound impressive, but we have 5,200 physical mailing addresses, and the only way to reach them is through mailings, especially those who are poor, elderly, and the minorities who have less opportunity to use email and social media. Having funding for mailings, full funding for mailings, is especially important for neighborhoods that aren't fully active. In my 25-plus years of involvement in Eugene's neighborhood associations, I've seen groups wax and wane and wax again. Without sufficient funds to reconnect to neighbors, rebuilding neighborhood associations are very unlikely to become active again. We're also asking that the Neighborhood Matching Grants Program has the $25,000 restored. By definition, as you know, it returns double the expenditure on the outset. And through cooperation with other nonprofits and on those projects, it serves so many people in the community. I believe the city gets back far more than 2 for 1. Thanks for your consideration of this request. The expenditures will continue to be some of the best bang for the taxpayer's buck. I've got 2 handouts for you. One is a compilation of what 9 neighborhoods have done over the past year. It's 13 pages long. And I also have a copy of the $500,000 expenditures in the matching grants program for you to consider as you think about this project. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the people we have signed up, so that concludes the public comment period. Down here a second. No. Okay, the next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. There were 2 sets of minutes in your packet: the February 11th, 2015 meeting, and also the meeting we had last week, April 29th, 2015. So I would ask if everybody's had a chance to review those, if there's any comments, any recommended changes.
I move to approve the minutes. Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the minutes. I guess I'd ask all who are in favor of that to please raise their hand. And if anyone's opposed, please raise your hand. Okay. Passes unanimously.
Aye.
Oh.
And aye.
Oh, okay. So we've got Councilors Clark and Surratt on the phone. Is that right?
Usually we do.
Correct.
Okay. I'm sorry. I should have mentioned that earlier.
Usually,
Pardon me?
usually we have a chance to comment on the public after the public forum.
Oh, okay. Then I'm going to back up just a little bit, and I'm going to ask if there's anyone who'd like to comment after the public forum. Councilor Taylor.
Thank you. Yes, about the aid for Nepal, I'm really glad that we passed that motion, and it is not up to the council to decide how we disperse it, but I think we did hear some good arguments for going through the sister city organization. About the newsletters, I have watched, I've been on the council 18 and a half years now, and I've been involved during that time, before and after redistricting altogether. I've been involved with about 6 neighborhoods, I think. And I have really seen how much the newsletters, the printed newsletters, do for people. When we first allowed more money for printing newsletters, I saw the former Crest neighborhood, which I'd been attending after one redistricting. After it became a part of my ward, I started attending it. And for sometimes there would be 3 people there counting me, and I wasn't even in the neighborhood. And when they started having printed newsletters, the attendance went up dramatically. And I've watched at other places too, the printed newsletters make a difference. When I've written something in the newsletter, sometimes I've gotten a call a month later, someone who just put it aside and just read it and to ask me about what I'd said in the newsletter. And I think it's better than the electronic in lots of ways. But one big thing, as has been mentioned here tonight, is that still not everyone has computers, not everyone has access to email. And even if you do, I think you read it and then forget it. Whereas if you get something in the mail, maybe set it aside and read it later, or think I'll look at it later and pick it up and look at it. And you remember that there was something there you wanted to think about, and you may pick it up and read it later. So I just think it's really valuable. If you think neighborhoods are valuable, I think the printed newsletters are valuable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, I pretty much agree with all the comments that the advocates for restoring these funds to the neighborhood services made. It's really, in the scheme of things, $50,000, $55,000, especially in this year of pretty balanced budget. It's really a very minor expense, and yet the sense of community and the building of the community in the neighborhoods is really priceless. I mean, you just do a quick scan of the matching grants program. It's just amazing. This is just what the city provided, and then these are matching grants, so it was twice that, really. And all of the positive things that happen in the neighborhoods when you have these things. Park cleanups, tree plantings, neighborhood events, participation in city affairs. It's real important for the mailings. I know that like people have said, well, not everyone has computers, and so I thought I would make a motion tonight. I'm not really prepared. It's a little slightly more involved than I had thought, so, but I will make some kind of a motion at our next meeting to get these funds restored, and I'm not sure, just off the top of my head, I think of marginal beginning working capital or reserve for revenue shortfall, or there's probably a couple other funds that it might be able to come out of, or perhaps leave it at the city manager's discretion. Not exactly sure how I'm going to word it, but not quite prepared to do it right now, but I definitely support the restoration of both of these funds. Thank you.
Thanks. Bob Clark.
I have a question for the city attorney. Glenn, I kind of saw you lurking in the back. I would like to, because I have a kind of unique moral ethic, and I feel like I might have a potential conflict of interest on the discussion of the neighborhood funds. And I'd like your take on that, knowing that I am a chairman of a neighborhood association and the department my wife works in. I want to get you, and I tried to reach out to you this morning, but unfortunately I wasn't able to. I just wanted to see if you felt I had a conflict of interest and if I should withdraw from this conversation.
My understanding is that the chair is not going to take any motions today, so let's have the conversation before the next meeting so I can ask you a couple questions and then I'll be able to advise you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Will.
I wanted to speak to the neighborhood funding. There's a lot of discussion about who has a computer or doesn't. I'm a person who has a computer, and I still think that the postcards and other neighborhood mailings are vital for the primary reason of neighborhood turnover. We have a lot of neighborhoods who get a lot of neighborhood turnover. People come and go from a neighborhood, and if you're not a person who typically would be politically involved, neighborhood group would never get your email address. You might never find that neighborhood group's Facebook page. And the mailings that go to a physical address, which is the only guaranteed way that we know that that is going to someone who is in that neighborhood, is the only option for reaching every address in that neighborhood. Until we have a way of, sending an email to a physical address, which is not currently a thing, a physical postcard or a newsletter is all we got. And I think if we continue to not fund the physical newsletter, we'll continue to see we'll see a lot more stagnation in our neighborhood groups, as well as not a lot of new faces coming out of the neighborhoods, and we will continue to see a lot of we often talk about in Eugene how we see a lot of the same people at meetings. Well, that's going to get worse if we don't recruit new people who have recently moved to Eugene and new faces who have moved from one neighborhood to another. So I'm definitely for restoring that funding.
Thank you. Marty?
Briefly, regarding the animal shelter, I think we desperately need to have a more public discussion about this. I appreciate all the work that's being done in the background, but this is one that needs to not happen in the background. I think Green Hill, I like Green Hill. I think they do a good job running a shelter. On the other hand, I share the speaker's concerns about putting it on private land. I think personally I'd rather have it over by Serbu on public land and then contract with Green Hill to run it, be more centrally located. I could be wrong about that, but whatever the answer is, I think we need a more public process about how to get there. On the neighborhoods, again, I think everybody agrees on the outcome, but I think how we get there matters. Some neighborhood associations, primarily, but not exclusively the more affluent ones, do a good job. I think we should have an amendment. We should vote the money again this year. But in the next year, we should ask the staff to evaluate whether it might make more sense to have that baseline of mailings done by the city. Hire a part-time staffer who will gather the content from the neighborhood associations and make sure we get 4 mailings out. There's probably some efficiencies with other mailings the city does already to households. And that way, I think we would be engaging on a level where the city would be operating in an area where they're very competent, but the content would be provided by the citizens. I really do appreciate all the work that the neighborhood associations do. I think there's an opportunity to do a better job for the whole city, including those people who live in neighborhoods where the neighborhood associations aren't quite so active.
Thank you. I think I'd like to ask Councilor Clark, Councilor Surratt, if you have anything that you want to add. Any comment?
Not at this time. No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Okay. I think that's all we've got. So we've approved the minutes, so I think we're ready to move on to the deliberation of the fiscal year 16 budget. I'd like to make a couple of comments as we head into that. We had a presentation on this last week, and find my notes here. We also had an opportunity for some discussion. We've had public comment tonight. We're also going to have public comment next week, and we've got opportunity for discussion tonight. And I think with respect to that discussion tonight, I think it's important that all the Budget Committee members have a chance to weigh in on this and provide comments, and I think it's important that we have the opportunity to hear from the public. I know there are people here with there may be some people here with motions ready to go, and I've been thinking today we should be careful about putting motions on the table tonight or acting on motions before we've had a chance to hear all the public comments. So I think what we'd like to do is ask that we not officially place motions on the table tonight, and we'll want discussion on intended motions. I think to the extent people like Councilor Brown have those, we'd like to hear about them, have that discussion. But then we can kind of queue up the motions for discussion at the next meeting once we've had the public comment. So I think with that, I'd like to kind of launch into the deliberation period, and I've got a got Will and whoever else is interested. So we'll start with Will.
Mostly, I saw some emails regarding the decision for PERS, and I'm curious if the staff have, comments on what's that going to mean. What is that going to mean as far as the short-term process for approval of this year's budget? I mean, are we still? I mean, does it look like we'll go ahead and approve the budget as is, and then we'll refine it, or are we going to delay approval? I mean, there's the process question, and there's also the what does this actually mean for the budget questions. So kind of two separate questions for us.
For this year's budget, it won't have any impact, and so my suggestion would be is just move forward with the budget. We're still in a stable place. What we don't know is out into the future. PERS is not set future rates. We don't know what that actually will mean into the future, and so my suggestion is to not have that PERS decision impact this budget conversation. If we come around to next year's budget, it might. We just don't know that yet. So there's nothing that we would know right now that I think would influence not moving forward with the budget right now. We don't have any more information to provide at this right now.
Josh.
Just a quick follow-up to that. I was actually going to ask the same question Will just asked. If you could help us understand that a little bit better, it'd be great, because what you just said seems a little bit at odds with Sue Cutts-George's email, whatever, last week, right out, I guess, last Wednesday or so. Just because it sounded like, maybe it was just the lack of any sense of scale of the impact that makes it hard to assess whether we're going to be more out of balance. It was very clear that we'd be in the red, but the magnitude wasn't there.
But what we don't know is, and what I think the intent of the email was to say, something is different and will change. We will need to address that into the future. We just don't have any information to base anything on for this budget at the moment. And we really won't know any of this until we move towards the end of the year anyhow, because PERS has to recalculate rates. What that does then matters as far as the rest of our revenues and expenditures actually play out. And so it really is much more of a next year's budget conversation than it would be this year's conversation. And I think what our intent with the email was to just say, yes, we know there will be an impact. We don't know what it is, and we'll play that out as we move forward.
Josh.
So then just a very quick follow-up. That's very helpful. Then I guess I would suggest, just following on Laura's suggestion last time, and I think suggestions from other folks as well, to revisit the longer-term picture and the possible revenue work from last year. If there is some way to time that with some just rough sense of scale calculation of what the PERS changes might mean, that would be really helpful, just so we'd have some of these big blocks to compare to each other.
Okay. Marty.
I usually have more time to prepare my comments. On the homelessness issue, I guess I would like to hear from the staff, not necessarily right now, but about what the plan is. Over the short term, my concern is I don't think it does anybody much good to have a large encampment like we did. The businesses don't like it. People don't like it. It's not good for the people who are living there. And so I'd kind of like an opinion about whether steps we've taken for this year and the money that we're going to give the Human Services Commission is going to be sufficient to provide enough housing to keep that from happening again. Over the long term, talking with the folks at, I guess, Emerald Village, Eugene, they're talking a lot about not necessarily cash transfers from the city, but possibly land and that sort of thing. It would be nice to hear if there's a long-term plan for that. If there is, that's great. If there are some initial investments we need to make on a small level in this budget to make that effective later, then I think that might be something we should look at. But I'd just like to hear from staff about that.
A couple of comments, and then we can provide more if we need to. there's not anywhere near enough money in the HSC budget to solve homelessness, and so that's not going to happen this year or next year or any time in the immediate future. But with that said, I do think there are numbers of things that are going on by many agencies and partners in the public and nonprofit, and even the private sector is sort of joining in, which I think is really a positive. One of the, just for example, the Poverty and Homelessness Board, which is put together by several jurisdictions, we're an important part of that. I think is really thinking about homelessness and poverty in a little bit longer, not just the current, but longer term. And so as they continue their work, I think that will be an important part of a future conversation. But there's also, as you mentioned, Emerald Village is looking to figure out a place to land. The rest stops are still up and going. Operation 365, which is around homeless veterans, which we're very much engaged in supporting that as well, is very much around, housing first and putting homeless veterans into housing. So all that is, I think, very active at this particular time. Whether or not we provide land or not provide land, I think that could be a conversation that the council has at some future date. They have also identified homelessness as an important area that they, as the council, are going to have more conversations on over the next couple of months and subsequent. So some of those things I think that you talk about may flesh out as those conversations occur.
Thank you. Mayor?
Just going to add a little bit to that, one of the things that, correct me if I don't say it correctly, but council asked was for our staff to look at putting together sort of a plan for the role of the city in trying to work on the homeless issues and to bring that back to council for discussion. So that's sort of the path that we're on right now. And in the meantime, the focus has been on there is funding right now for vets. So that is the place where there is the most ability to do something right now. And so we have the 365 initiative going that over this year our aim in a partnership is to house all of our homeless vets. And approximately 365 was what we put on it. And up to this point, we have come close to already housing 200 of those. So there are things happening. It's not adequate. It's not enough. But we are moving and looking towards the plan. Right?
Thank you. Bob? Thank you.
Not too many meetings left in my term, so I'm going to once again take this opportunity to jump on my soapbox. There has been a dynamic shift in the 3 years that I've been on the Budget Committee. The last 2 years has been the cut, the grab from reserves, the try to retain, the fight for who do we cut, who do we keep, how do we trim, what do we do, what's the philosophy, how hard are we going to kick the can, how high do we stack the Jenga blocks, right? Did I get them all? Okay. The shift has now been we have a stable budget. We don't have to dip into reserves. The work of the last 2 years has been of value, and the staff and revenue has come in. I'm going to encourage everybody not to start considering adding in a lot of additional expenses to a stable budget. With the email that we received, the 17 budget is now got a little bit of a red question mark with PERS. We don't know how that's going to hit. I would hate to see things added this year, and then all of a sudden next year the dynamic shifts again back to who do we cut, how far do we cut, how do we make it hurt? Be cautious, be fiscally responsible, and don't fall into temptation just because our budget is stable right now to think that we can start adding in a lot of extra expenses or adding back expenses that we've cut that are budgeted for. You begin that slippery slope to start that downward trend to being unstable again. And the way to keep stable and again to move us forward in a sustainable budget is to look at other revenue sources. And again, this year, we have dropped that ball. That ball has not been in play. We have not had any discussions about other revenue sources, and the work that the revenue team did last year has not happened. I encourage you next year to pick that ball up and run with it and help the city get to a sustainable budget.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Councilors Surratt and Clark if you, did you guys want to get in the queue, or do you have any comments?
I'll be at the meeting in person next week, so I'll save my comments for them. Thank you.
Okay.
And if I need to jump in the queue, I'll yell out for you, sir.
Okay, okay. All right, thank you. Well, I put myself in the queue. I guess I want to echo a little bit of what I heard from Bob Clark just then. And with respect to the neighborhood, adding back neighborhood funds, I will say I came in here tonight thinking it was not a good idea to add them back. And I find myself swinging a little bit, and I want to read the material we were given. I want to hear additional comments if there are any next time. But I'm thinking in general, I'm pretty supportive right now of this budget the way it's been proposed, and particularly the idea that we're maintaining some focus on stability. We've reached a point of having a stable budget. We have some more uncertainty now in the future than we did last week. But we knew we don't really have a sustainable budget looking out a couple of years, and we need to continue to work on that. I'm in agreement with the city manager's recommendation that was in the budget document that we be careful adding back, or maybe that we not even look to add back, particularly ongoing costs, but adding back funding to restore services. That maybe we take a year or two, and we have a little bit of breathing room here. And remember, our longer-term goal is a sustainable budget. I think then, with respect to the newsletter, to adding the funding back, I think the primary thing I'm still kind of struggling with is, the information we have from staff that out there is an amount of funding right now that the city's providing to the neighborhood groups, and it's not entirely clear that it's all being used. In fact, I think for some years it's not all being used. And there's kind of, to me, I think, I'm probably simplifying what is a rather complex situation, but there's probably some process involved here, some review of how that's being allocated, how it's being spent, and maybe there's some way to utilize the funds that are being given now, and maybe where we have the shortfalls to allow some of these, so they can do the newsletters. So I guess I'm wanting to be a little cautious before we add that back, particularly this year. Now, having said that, I guess I do want to continue to hear some comment about it, and I want to read the material that we were given earlier. So, thanks. Josh.
Actually, I've already spoken. Councilor Evans, why don't you go on?
Okay, Councilor Evans.
As far as the newsletters are concerned, I think this is a huge social equity issue across the board. I represent an area where our neighborhood association, Active Bethel Citizens, is no longer active. And I get many contacts, phone calls from residents who don't have internet access or internet service and can't afford it. And so a lot of people that do engage the city in terms of reading what's going on have done that through the ABC newsletter. Now, I don't know how to determine whether not having that access has negatively impacted the participation of residents in my ward or not, but I can tell you this, that for us to be viable in having a communication line with all of our citizens, I think that print material is necessary in one form or fashion to get it there. So I'm leaning in favor of restoration of that funding for the newsletter. However, with this caveat, I understand exactly what Bob is saying in terms of being cautious as how we proceed, because we have no idea what the ultimate impact of that court decision with regard to PERS is going to have on our budget going forward, and particularly in light of the fact that I'm not sure whether we're going to have to, is that going to be a retroactive situation where we're going to have to restore, some kind of payment or funding back to PERS and to, the retirees that are out there, and what it's going to look like going forward. So I think that we need to be very careful in terms of how we move forward with restoration of any piece of this, as well as looking at maybe doing some kind of bond measure with regard to an animal shelter, because I don't see us being able to, at this point, having that fuzzy crystal ball to tell us what it's going to look like in the future in terms of establishing a public animal shelter, a better option than what we currently have on First Street now. But I would like to see something happen so that it is a viable building and a viable entity, and that we have some way of determining how we are going to accommodate an increase in ongoing operational costs that would be attributed to establishing a shelter. So those are two thoughts right there. And, I think that we should look at different ways of reestablishing that kind of print communication with our neighborhoods.
Can I get in the queue, please?
Yes. Councilor Poling.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Ken and Bob for their very thoughtful comments about the status of our budget. When John gave the presentation, he made it very clear to us that we're at a stable point but not a sustainable point. And we all need to remember what it took for us to get to this current position that we're in. It took a lot of hard work, and not only by the Budget Committee and the Council, and John and Christy and her people, but by every single employee within the city organization. And that's the people that really deserve the credit, because they're the ones that came up with the ideas on how to get us to the stable budget point. So we do, in fact, need to be very careful about how we proceed on down the line in light of what's coming up with the final outcome of the PERS situation. As far as the request for the put back into the neighborhood services, I guess before I make any real comments on that, I need to know where that request, where the money's going to come from for sure. But I think we should all take a second read on the memo that came out from Twyla Miller about the funding for the neighborhood services and how it has been used and what staff is currently doing with the neighborhood services and the neighborhood associations and what they're planning to do in the future. So we all need to take time to reread very carefully that memo. And I just touch real briefly on the question about the animal shelter. This is another one of those situations where we can't take it on by ourselves. The city of Eugene was kind of forced into the position of trying to take on the homeless issue by ourselves. And we really struggled with that as a city. It took 4 years of us, the city, trying to deal with the homeless issue before the county ever got involved in a more active way other than, with the financials, the money going into human services, et cetera, et cetera. 4 years before the county finally took an active part. And it helped. It helped greatly, and I appreciate the fact that they did finally step up. So before we start having any discussions about animal shelters at our level here, we need to have the broader policy discussion by the various jurisdictions about what direction we want to go on that. It's going to take money. Where's that money going to come from? Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to run it? I think that is a bigger discussion than we at the Budget Committee can actually take on at this time.
Thank you. Councilor Clark.
Thank you. I want to echo George's remarks as well as Bob Clark's too, and urge caution because I think the PERS fall through, although in following years is what we'll have to deal with it, but it will be significant, and we will need to be prepared for that. I would also like to say that I think when people watch our deliberations, they've watched tonight as we gave $50,000 to Kathmandu, and we wonder whether we should restore services to them to let them know when their neighborhood association's meeting. I'm going to be in favor of restoring the $30,000 to neighborhood associations. Thanks.
Josh?
All right. I don't want to get into too many more details of this piece on neighborhood newsletter funding, but I would say I really second the comments by Councilor Evans on the equity issues, and if there were some creative solutions that staff could suggest that doesn't just restore funding but brings back something in a way that addresses that particular concern, it would be nice to hear that. So I guess I just wanted to pick up Bob Clark's metaphor about having dropped the ball. I'm hoping that the ball is still lying there and that time has not run out. There was that one duck touchdown where that happened, and I'm actually wondering whether there is time this year to pick that back up again. I feel I really have to defer to those of you who were here before and did a tremendous amount of hard work, which I've read but didn't have to put in the long hours on. And so if there were some way in this cycle to revisit this, so we're at least, at worst, starting from a more advanced discussion next time, even if we can't sort of change the structure of the budget or do anything like that this year, I would certainly volunteer to be a foot soldier in helping out with revisiting revenue options. And I think this was the spirit of Laura's suggestion last time, as I understood it.
Good. Thanks. Councilor Evans.
I know this may not be a question that you can answer right off the bat for the city manager, but given the court ruling that's just come down, would we be looking at for the next fiscal cycle being kind of in the place we were before in the last fiscal cycle with dealing with these issues? Because we got a major relief in terms of our budget situation last time by having that PERS piece that gave us the $1 million or so that we were able to crawl back to some semblance of balance in this. So I'm not sure if you could answer that right now, but I'm kind of thinking through the way my mind works. It's like, oh, you know what, we're going to be kind of back in the same soup again next fiscal cycle as we were the last fiscal cycle. Do you have any thoughts around that?
We just really don't know, because we don't know how the PERS board actually implements this. There are different options that they can do as far as how they roll it out. We don't know the specific impact on, you talked about retro or going forward, and so there are just many, many unanswered questions, so we just don't know. And I think the time, and this will get a little bit, the revenue conversation could start when we would know more about next year's budget, is really as we move towards the end of this year, because then we also know some other pieces of the budget, whether it's some of the revenues, property taxes, and other kinds of things. We'll just know more at that time, so we'll know what the actual impact will be. And so as far as the PERS, we really won't know the budgetary impact until we really move towards the end of this year and we have more information.
Thanks. Feeling like we should have some more discussion. There's nobody in the queue right now. Councilor Polling.
Well, I think the reason why the discussion is so abbreviated compared to past years is because where we are in the budget process and the fact that we are at a stable point within the budget. And, you know, one other thing I'd like to add is that one of the things that it cost us to get to here were tens of millions of dollars. And how many, 100 plus positions?
100 positions, $30 million.
So, you know, we may be at a stable point, but it sure doesn't look good. You know, we had to cut a lot of services. Fortunately, we didn't actually cut that many actual bodies. It was all basically vacant and retirements and that type of thing. So that's, you know, that's something to remember in our discussions.
It is. Anyone else? Okay. We have a meeting next Tuesday, May 12th, I believe. We're going to, as mentioned earlier, and as you know, we're going to start that meeting with a second public hearing. We'll hear some additional comment, and then we'll have opportunity for some more deliberation and also consideration of recommendations on the FY16 budget. So to the extent you all have recommendations, you should send them to Twyla and kind of aggregate all of that and put it in some form of a queue and get it ready for discussion next Tuesday. So if there's nothing else, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Okay.